Matthew 14, beginning in verse 22, the inspired word of God reads as follows. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat by this time was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. And when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased.
God sent the disciples to the boat. Jesus is walking on water. But while the other disciples don't recognize Jesus, Peter does. Peter wants to go to Jesus. Peter wants to follow Jesus because Peter knows that no matter how dark the night, no matter how high the waves, no matter how strong the wind or wet the water, Peter knew that it was safer out of the ship in a storm with Jesus than being in a ship in a storm without Jesus. I can hear the other disciples saying, "But Peter, you can't walk on water. It's impossible. It's foolish. You'll get wet. You'll drown. It's dangerous." But Jesus says, "Come." The boat is the safest place to be. But Jesus says, "Come." The rules of normalcy say you should stay in the boat. But Jesus says, "Come." Peter shows his faith, gets out of the boat, puts his life at risk, holds his hand out to Jesus, begins to follow Jesus, and he walks on water. Now, we all know the story, and we often condemn Peter because Peter, in his following Jesus, takes his eyes off Jesus and he begins to sink. That Peter has a lapse of faith is why he begins to fall. Even the Bible records Jesus as saying to Peter, "O ye of little faith." But while we condemn Peter, let's give Peter some credit tonight, because at least Peter got out of the boat. The rest of the disciples stayed in the boats. A little faith is better than no faith at all. If Peter had little faith, the other disciples had no faith. Because if you remain in the boat, you'll never know what it's like to walk on water. Being safe is easy. It's not hard work. Do what everyone else is doing. Do what we've always done. But change is hard. At least Peter got out of the boat, which is more than what the other disciples did. But yet, how many of us stay in the boat without ever exercising faith and walking in the fullness of what God has for our lives?
Peter knew that no matter the storms we face in life, it's always safest with Jesus. I want to talk about the other 11 disciples still in the boat. Why are they still in the boat? Two reasons. Number one, because they were afraid. Number two, because they have a boat, right? Because when you have a boat on the water, you stay in the boat. It's not rocket science. And here's what I mean. When fear takes hold of our lives, we usually turn to something that makes us feel safe, even if it's not God. So let me ask you a very important question today. What's your boat? See, your boat is whatever represents safety and security to you apart from God. If you want to know what your boat is, your fear will tell you. Just ask yourself this: when fear sets in, where do I turn to instead of God. That's your boat. It might be a parent, a friend, a spouse, your children. Maybe it's a career, your physical appearance, your gifting. It could be your possessions, money, alcohol, self-pity. Maybe it's the amount of likes you get on Instagram. Whatever it is, God's telling you today, like Peter, come, get out of the boat.